both parents are required to provide it. Also a deadline for how quickly the other party has to turn around and provide reimbursement. It's kind of to anticipate basic needs of both households and based on a whole number of factors. But it also is one of the areas where we see a lot of fighting post-divorce or judgment of paternity being entered.
Hi, everyone, and thanks for joining us today to talk about our family law issues. I have with me today attorney Austin Miller, who is a partner at Sterling Law Offices and my go-to in-house expert on cases and statutes. He's like a little encyclopedia of family law. So welcome, Austin, and thank you so much for being with us today.
It is always a pleasure, Holly. Thanks for having me.
And I'm seeing like your background is way cooler than mine because you have these incredible Lego sets. For anyone who's only listening and not viewing, you're missing out on, I don't know, what is that? A ship? Some sort of Star Wars ship?
Yep, we've got a couple Star Wars ships in the background, the Lord of the Rings. My 8-year-old did 50% of that Lord of the Rings set. It was a fun group project.
So I can tell what your side hobbies are. We like Star Wars movies, we like Lord of the Rings books, and we like Legos.
Yep.
All right, on to less fun, more fun topics. I don't know, perspective, I guess. All right, so in our practice, I come across a question frequently when there's children. We're dealing with money, all lots of different issues of money and support, and it seems like we often think in terms of straight child support or maintenance, but in reality, the exchange of funds between either ex-spouses or co-parents, if they were never married, right, goes beyond child support, correct?
Yeah, it does. There's all sorts of different financial components when we're dealing with it, when we're creating a parenting plan and financial arrangements when kids are involved.
One of the primary issues that comes up and that the court really wants to see addressed in the documents, meaning the final orders on custody and placement in the parenting plan, is medical expenses, healthcare expenses. So I want to dive into that and really get a better understanding of what is covered, what is addressed by the court, because reality is kids are going to have medical expenses. That's going to come up, and who pays for that, and how insurance works. All of those questions are ones we've faced from clients and that I think people out there want to know more about. So let's start with the insurance. Medical insurance, who provides that for a child after a divorce?
Well, and that's going to be dependent on all sorts of different circumstances, but we're going to look, it's either going to be one of the parents or both the parents or the state, right? But in some fashion, we're going to have health insurance for the minor children. We look at things like what each parent has available through their employer, what's the cost to that parent to provide insurance, what their income is it at a reasonable amount, or is at a reasonable cost? All sorts of things go into that ultimate decision.
And you mentioned the state. Are you referring to Badger Care?
Yeah, Badger Care. If a party qualifies and neither party has available to them through their employer at a reasonable cost health insurance for the kids, then they can get on Badger Care.
So that's more of a alternative only when not available from either of the parents, then perhaps the state might provide it, but the court is looking for presumably the parents to step up and provide insurance whenever possible.
Yeah, that's the first step. If it's available through the parents at a reasonable cost to their employer, then yeah, they're going to be required to provide it.
Is it one parent, both parent? Like, how is it determined who's doing it?
I think the default orders, to be honest, are both parents are required to provide it. That doesn't always financially make sense for a family. So we'll often compare plans and say, hey, this is our plan. This is who's covered. These are the providers that we can use. This is how much our out of pocket is. So we'll compare both insurance plans as long as both parents have it available, and usually make a decision as to which one best fits the needs of that family and the kids.
Sure, because I mean, if possible, right? If parents can split coverage for the child on one plan, that might be more cost effective than each of them obtaining coverage and paying for separate coverage for the same child, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And so, okay, let's use the example of one parent is going to provide the coverage. Let's just call it dad. Dad's employer has the best coverage at the lowest cost, so dad's going to provide coverage. He presumably is providing his own coverage too. So his plan is his coverage and the child's coverage. How is mom supposed to know how much she's responsible for paying?
Yeah, so we need a couple different numbers. Usually we get them from HR, or sometimes our clients have them available to them right off the bat. But we need to know the cost of the plan if, in this example, dad's cost just to cover himself. So a single plan or employee only plan. Let's say that is $200 to dad. To add on the child, he now has to pay for an employee plus child or a family plan, and now it costs him $300 a month. Then we take the difference between the two, which is $100, and mom's responsible for half of the child's cost. So $50 in that example that mom would owe.
So mom's not getting penalized by then having to pay for half of dad's total plan, which is essentially then her paying for his coverage, dad's coverage. She's really just paying for half the cost to insure the child.
Yep, just half the cost for the child.
Understood. That makes perfect sense. So let's go beyond. Well, let me ask another question actually about insurance. Are there other healthcare insurance that's mandated, like dental, I mean vision? Are those things mandated, or how is that usually dealt with?
Those are optional plans. There's not a mandate that either parent provide those, but more often than not, the dental plans and the vision plans are usually at a much lower cost. It's normal to have those provided, and in negotiations, we usually treat them the same way. We look at the cost of the vision plans, cost of the dental plans, look at the difference between employee only and employee plus children or a family plan, and treat the costs the same.
Got it. What about expenses beyond the insurance coverage itself? So you get to, your uninsured copays or out of pocket coverage that typically goes into healthcare expenses. How are we dealing with those expenses?
So by default, if it's left up to a court or orders are entered or no one's negotiated, the court's going to say, all right, you are both parents, no matter what the other financial arrangements are, you're each responsible for 50% of any out of pocket costs. So that could be prescriptions, copays, any charges until your deductible's met. Those are all split 50-50. And it's not just for going to the doctor. I think dental expenses, vision expenses, mental health expenses, arguably orthodontic expenses, anything that falls under the category of medical broadly is split 50-50.
So almost more appropriate to call it healthcare expenses as opposed to medical because it sounds like it's pretty broad.
It is pretty broad, but it also is one of the areas where we see a lot of fighting post divorce or judgment of paternity being entered. We see people, well, I don't have, let's say the kid needs braces. If it's not explicitly outlined in the agreement, but there's a need for braces, that cost is probably going to be ultimately split by a court, telling both parents to pay for half. But the timing of those are tricky. Maybe one party has more access to savings; they can pay $3,000 out of pocket right away, or they pay the whole amount and then demand the other parent pay 3,000, immediately to them. So it's really important that we work out a kind of a detailed structure on, all right, which cost can we just swap back and forth? Are there certain thresholds or certain types of expenses where we might want to be a little more detailed in our parenting plan or marital settlement agreement on how to address them?
Yeah.
And that's where we
It's,
can.
it sounds like that would be a very good idea is if there's going to be question marks about things like orthodontists or I can imagine other specialists or out of network providers that those costs can start getting pretty steep and you'd want to have fairly clear expectations about who's going to need to pay for what in the future.
Yeah, and what documentation do you need to provide to the other parent when you're asking for reimbursement? Because we run into cases all the time. You get a bill from a provider, but it's before insurance has run through. It's not an
Mm.
explanation of benefits. So we want to make sure we detail what documents are going to the other parent, what does it need to show, and so everyone has some basic comfort level in sharing these types of expenses.
Yeah, and you mentioned this, and I just want to clarify. So, regardless of other financial arrangements, meaning specifically child support, we're still typically splitting healthcare expenses, medical insurance, and out of pocket medical. So, like, let's use this same example. Dad says, I'm already paying child support. These medical expenses, that's what you're getting child support for. You're saying, nope, that's different.
That's different. In a previous episode that we've discussed child support, it's kind of to anticipate basic needs of both households and based on a whole number of factors. I think our laws in Wisconsin are designed to carve out these uninsured healthcare expenses and splitting them evenly because they're so variable per child, right? Some kids might
Yep.
get through 18 years of their childhood and only have a $20 copay every year and at the doctor and maybe twice a year go to the dentist and the cost is so minimal. Other kids are going to have some serious medical problems. Their injuries, strange illnesses, braces, and to build that into support isn't, I think, impossible. So we have to treat it differently.
Yeah, that makes sense. You mentioned about reimbursement process, meaning one parent advances a cost. You had said you got to keep receipts. You have to actually know what was paid before the other parent can be expected to reimburse. What does that process look like? What does that timeline look like for actually exchanging funds?
Yeah, that's something that we need to have detailed. We need to know, okay, when you receive the explanation of benefits, you've paid the entire amount. How long do you have to give it to their parent? Usually we say within a month, but it could be extended. Some people like to reconcile these quarterly. I think doing it a little quicker, monthly at least, is better.
Meaning a deadline by which you have to ask the other parent to reimburse.
Yeah, so you can't sit on, a $3,000 bill for 2 years and then throw it in there when the other side makes you angry about some other issue, and then you throw a $3,000 bill at them from 2 years ago. We've never seen that happen, of course, but it gives clear expectations when you're supposed to submit the request for reimbursement, what you're supposed to submit, and then also a deadline for how quickly the other party has to turn around and provide reimbursement.
That makes very good sense. So that timing is understood by both parents. You have this much time to send a request for reimbursement, and you have this much time to pay your reimbursements. So this has all been very helpful. Any final words of advice for parents who are either in this process right now or know that it's coming in the future? What would you recommend that they look out for, that they do?
Yeah, I would look out for, especially if your child or children have special needs, if you have specialists, if there's regularly reoccurring costs that you need that you're going to pay, build those into the agreement. Have too much detail can sometimes be a problem, but not in situations like this. Let's make sure expectations are clear, status quo is clear, and then I also like to recommend, even in low conflict or amicable cases, use like a parenting app or something or some platform that you can have a centralized spot for communications with the kids or communications about the kids, calendaring, and these expense reimbursements. So apps like Our Family Wizard or Talking Households or Two Parents, there's a bunch of them out there, is a great way to have everything in one spot. And that helps just keep things clear and conflict lower.
Yeah, that organization, reminding yourself, what do I need to submit? What do I owe money for? Knowing exactly where to find it and not having to think about, oh, was that by text? Was that by email? So that's a great point of advice there. Well, thank you so much, Austin. This is always helpful to hear your tidbits and words of wisdom. So appreciate you being here today.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Understanding how medical expenses are split is crucial, but when it comes to alimony, the process can be even more complex. Learn how alimony is determined and what factors you need to consider in our next video.